Hello and welcome to Beyond the Edge, where we dig into the ins and outs of trends affecting modern digital businesses. I'm Tom Mount. I'm a senior solutions architect at Edgio. I focus on our applications platform and our security solutions that make up part of that platform. I've been a web developer for nearly 20 years, working mostly for or with digital marketing agencies. I've done a lot of work with higher ed and e-commerce, including eBay, American Airlines, and the University of Pennsylvania. And today I'm joined by Howie Ross.
Hello, I'm Howie Ross. I'm the Senior Director of Product Management for the Edgio Applications platform, where I focus on web acceleration, including our CDN and edge computing. I've been doing web development and cloud architecture for 20 years. And during that time, I've had the pleasure of working across many industries, including fintech and e-com, where I've worked with numerous brands, including Urban Outfitters, Coach, Verizon, and M&M's.
Great. Thanks, Howie. So today we want to talk with you a little bit about the security challenges that are facing composable architectures specifically. Now, we know that there's a lot of security threats out there for website owners and content managers. According to IBM, there's a study out there they say that 83% of US companies have experienced a data breach, and that can cost upwards of $9.4 million in the US. That's more than double the global average. Okta, they're one of the largest single sign-on identity business providers in the world. They published a report that 34% of all login attempts globally were by bots. So this is just bots literally just trying to get into networks. And Count just showed that 1 in 4 organizations have lost $500,000 from a single bot attack. So security is a huge threat. It's a huge issue that we have to deal with. And as we talk about composable architectures, that's something that really starts to get a little bit more challenging to address. And so on this podcast today, we want to take a look at some of the threats that are out there for composable architectures and what we can do about that. So before we get too deeply into this, Howie, I wonder if you can maybe define for us, what is composable architecture? What does that mean to you?
Sure, I can try. It's kind of one of those things that is a little hard to define, but you know it when you see it. Composable architecture it's really a reaction to the monolithic all-in-one platforms that were used, for let's say the previous decade, and the limitations imposed on the user experience and the developer workflow. So with composable architecture, solutions are composed from tools and vendors across the stack that allow you to select the best-in-class tools to meet your organization's and your users' needs. And composable is often associated with headless or decoupled front ends, where we are separating the presentation layer from the data layer, and often relying on microservices or at least API-driven architectures to facilitate this headless, decoupled architecture and the composing a complete solution out of various tools.
So that sounds pretty flexible, but it also sounds like it may be a little bit more technically challenging to implement some of these stacks. What would make a company choose to go with a composable architecture as opposed to this more monolithic, well-established pattern?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, there are numerous benefits to composable architectures, including, as I mentioned, improved user experience due to fewer UX limitations, right? So on a monolithic stack, you're going to be limited often to what capabilities are provided by that stack. However, with composable architecture, it's kind of like the sky's the limit. The team and the designers can dream up whatever experience they would like, and then you're going to have more agility in terms of being able to roll out those features to your end users. So in fact, we've seen organizations such as Iceland Air have a 90% reduction in the delivery time to roll out new features, including promotions. So you're going to have decreased time to market and time to value for the work. And in addition, as I mentioned, you get to select the best in class tools and vendors, and really kind of build this this network of ecosystem partners that you can rely on to build your solution and deliver that value. And then also it's a bit more future proofed than a monolithic stack, because you can swap these tools in and out as you see fit. So, say your customer review tool is no longer meeting your needs. You want to use a different one. You don't have to go and replace your entire solution. You can just replace that specific tool and continue to iterate on your stack and keep it really modern.
See, now you're talking my language a little bit there. My a lot of my background is in building more applications on the web, and looking at the architecture of some of this. I love the idea of having to like a future proof stack where you can just move things in and out. And I think too that future proofing feels like it extends not just at the component level, but also kind of the infrastructure level, right? I mean, we're seeing now a lot more focus on things done at the edge, things done serverless, things in the cloud than we were, 5 even years ago, 10 years ago, certainly. There's a lot more emphasis on that. And I think having a more flexible architecture where you can move components out of, a larger data center and into more of obviously it's the cloud, everything's in a data center, right? We understand that part. But having something where you can focus more on the edge and build things specifically for edge processing and for serverless functions, and keep those things fast and nimble is, I think, a huge benefit as well. And I think too, like security is also something that benefits from this, right? Because as we've migrated more and more services and more things onto the cloud and have these, edge enabled solutions, security comes along with that. So we can do a lot of zero trust security right at the edge now, as opposed to having to come all the way back into a data center. And having a composable architecture allows us to, I think, build zero trust security right into the fabric of the application itself. And look, like I said at the top, I've been building websites for 20 years. I've worked with tool chains all over the place. I think one of the nice things that we've seen, especially with some composable frameworks out there, is that a lot of these frameworks now have built-in capabilities for static site generation. And those things can be just streamed right into that build pipeline and pushed right out as part of this. You can just swap out whatever components or architectures you want. Your pipeline will build it all, and it all ends up being, distilled into that, static files, the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript, the images that we need, regardless of how they were built and what puzzle pieces fit together. The pipelines can still ultimately stay the same. The deploys can still reflect that. So I think that strikes me from the architecture perspective as another couple of benefits that you get from being able to kind of move these components in and out.
Yeah, those are great points. So in addition to the benefits for the development team and for the customer, there's significant benefits for the DevOps team and the options that it offers you for your infrastructure architecture, whether it's through leveraging static generation and really building your site for the CDN and for the edge, or leveraging serverless and really taking advantage of those advancements in cloud technology for your scalability and your security. And Tom and I've had the pleasure to work with a number of customers who have gone on this journey to Composable and have seen significant benefits. So, customers include, some of the ones I mentioned earlier, such as Coach and M&Ms that are either have completed or are well along the way on their composable journeys. One of the other little bit lesser known customers is called Universal Standard. That's on their mission is to be the most inclusive clothing brand in the world, and for that mission, they chose to go with a composable architecture built on top of the Shopify platform. So, rather than being a bit constrained by the limitations imposed by Shopify in terms of the user experience and the developer workflow, they're leveraging the Shopify storefront APIs and building a composable solution using the Nuxt framework, which is built on Vue.js. And they saw, significant performance improvement, bringing the page load times down from, multiple seconds to, in many cases, sub-second, and improving, not just these technical performance metrics, but actual business metrics. In fact, they saw a 200% improvement on conversion rate as a result of this move to composable. That is, of course, really affecting their bottom line and helping them on their mission.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, we talk about sub-second page loads here, and it's people always. I always when I'm talking with people, I get the side eye, like, "Are you sure about that?" And no, it's true. Um, one of the customers that I sometimes show off that has a similar story. It's a company called Shoe Carnival. So they moved to headless as well. They had their previous architecture. They were looking specifically at performance concerns around things like first page load and transitions between pages. So their stats before they went headless, they were looking at 3.5 seconds for a first page load, and sometimes up to 6 seconds when transitioning from one page to the next when you're browsing. And they really wanted to get that down. And there's a whole lot of reasons why it's a great idea to move that down. We do have a lot of market research that shows that for every additional second that customers are waiting as a page is loading, it increases their chance of just leaving the site and going somewhere else. So obviously page speed and conversion rate is pretty closely tied. And they recognize this. And so they came to Edgio looking for some help. And once they had finished their move over to headless and they had done some of these performance improvements that we've been talking about, they took their transitions and even their first page loads to 1 second, sometimes even less than 1 second. They are up to 70% faster on Edgio. Their median load time for pages is 1 second, right? So they're seeing huge performance gains as a consequence of choosing this headless architecture and being able to optimize their performance at every level of the stack. And even their page loads, their subsequent page loads from, once somebody actually lands on the site, they're down 92% on that speed. They're down to 500 milliseconds on some of those page loads. So huge performance gains that they were able to realize coming over. But it isn't just performance that is an attractive feature of Composable. Sticking with Shoe Carnival, in addition to the performance gains, they also took the opportunity of going into Composable to ramp up some of their security efforts. And what they found was within the first 30 days of launching their new Composable site, they had tracked over 8 million malicious requests that were blocked. And I want to make sure that I reiterate that those requests were blocked. It was not that they, had 8 million requests that they didn't know what to do with, right? The security solution that they found that we provided was able to block all of those requests and provide visibility into what maybe they hadn't been seeing before, the volume of malicious requests that they were receiving. So this kind of transitions me into a little bit talking about some of the security benefits because, we spent a lot of time so far talking about performance gains, and they're very real. And, we track our customers when they come over. We like to see the performance gains that they have, and we have some amazing success stories. But I think security gains is another good reason for choosing a composable architecture. I like to look at it as kind of a layered, tiered defense, right? So we want to keep the bad actors as far away as possible from your origin, from where your actual servers and your data is located. And you can think of it in terms of, putting up a fence around your property. You can have signs on your fence that say keep out, no trespassing, whatever. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't lock your door at night. It just means that you want to put a guardrail up as far away as possible to keep out as much as you possibly can. And when you choose a composable architecture, one of the advantages is that you then get to pick and choose the security features that you have in place and where those security features are located. And we recommend that you have security at every level that you can put it, right? So we'll put that security out at the edge. We'll put that security in at the origin. If there's other APIs or services, we mentioned that going composable generally means that you're increasing, the number of APIs that are exposed on your site. So we want to make sure that those APIs have security. And with a composable architecture, it actually becomes really simple to do that. You do have to account for all of those places, but you can put out security at all of those different levels. One of the other nice things about having a composable architecture, and I touched on this a little bit before, is the ability to have those static pages. Now, static pages are great for performance, But they also have a really nice benefit for security because static pages will minimize the amount of two-way data transfer that happens between the client and the server. If you think of a traditional kind of monolithic app, a PHP app or something like that, somebody is entering data onto this application and it has to go back into the server. If you're loading up a new page, the server has to go request this data and send it back. There's a lot of opportunities for data to come both in and out of your systems. And while obviously some data has to come out, you want to make sure that not all the data that is in your systems comes out. That's what we call a data breach. So having static pages cuts down on the opportunities for somebody to tinker with your server by means of the page that is displayed on the web browser, because all that's on the page is just HTML, right? It already has the data. It's not fetching that data from anywhere. It was built with that data in mind already. So having static pages, while certainly a performance gain, can also be a security gain. And those static pages then can be served directly from a CDN. And so I think that's the last piece of the puzzle here in that particular part of the security, is that instead of having to go back to your servers to fetch this data every single time a page is loaded, with the CDN, that page is cached. It's available worldwide. And your servers don't even see those requests because they're all handled right at the outside edge.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I agree that, one of the, I would say, primary benefits of a composable solution, whether you're doing, static site generation or you're leveraging, serverless for server-side rendering, is that ability to leverage the CDN in a more effective way. That's going to provide you with improved page load times, but also security benefits as well, of keeping the bad actors as far away as possible, from your data and your crown jewels, and also minimizing that two-way data transfer as well. But so while there are some security benefits, I think there are also some challenges as well. So we talked about how composable solutions, you're selecting the best of breed of vendors and tools, and so that means there's more tools, there's more vendors, which means potentially more ways into your systems and your architectures. So that's a risk, and one of an increasingly common way of compromising organizations is through impersonation, right? Rather than brute forcing my way into your website or your servers, I'm just going to figure out how to social engineer my way into looking like one of your employees. And now, as opposed to having to kind of breach your core network and your enterprise tools, I may be able to just breach one of the many tools and vendors you're using on your composable solution. So identity and access management becomes increasingly important. So, and this can be mitigated in a number of ways through having standards and single sign-on, and things like that. But it is something you want to be thoughtful about, because of the rise of data skimming, and this is a class of vulnerabilities or exploits. It's often referred to as Mage Cart, which was one of the original exploitations of this type of attack, where a script is put onto a website by these attackers that is then going to skim personal information. In this case, it was credit card information from primarily Magento sites, and it was widespread, and it really kind of brought to the forefront the criticality and the severity of this issue, and the importance of having managing the integrity of your code through the whole supply chain, and also as I mentioned, the importance of really being careful about your identity and access management.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, with more tools, there are more opportunities to come in. I think from an application architecture perspective, a lot of a lot of composable sites make heavy use of API calls back to the server to populate new pages, to facilitate quicker browsing. Um, and I think API security is another area where you have to pay more attention to what you're doing and to what's going on. So obviously, I don't want my page when I'm shopping on a site. I don't want my page cached for you, and you probably don't want your cart cached for me because that just is confusing, and I don't understand you know, why I have what I have in my cart when I pull it up. So obviously, we need to make sure that we have fast responsive pages, but we also want to make sure that they're personalized for the individual user, and usually that's done through some sort of API access. And a lot of times, the visitor's info ends up in that API data that's being transmitted. And so that is where kind of the zero trust portion of the security comes in around APIs specifically, right? So we can do things like edge personalization, where we're grabbing cached content from the server, and at the edge, rather than in the browser, we're pulling this data from the server and incorporating that into the final response that we're sending out. That's a great way of having really fast, really responsive pages that are still cached, but also have personal data on them. Another way that we can kind of do a little bit of security magic at the edge is to use something like JSON web tokens for authentication. This is I won't go into the whole details of what they are because it's one of my current favorite projects to play around with, and I could talk about it for probably another 20 minutes just on my own. But
Do that in another podcast.
yeah, we'll do a podcast on JWTs later. But yeah, the cool part about it is it's data that's transmitted kind of in clear text, but it's also got an encrypted signature to it that the server knows how to generate its own version of that encrypted signature. And so you can check the validity of the user coming in to make sure that nothing's been tampered with, that the credentials are correct, and that the user has access to everything that they say they should have access to. You can validate that access is still valid and correct. And you can do that also at the edge using, a serverless function or a cloud function, things like that. So wrapping that up around the APIs is going to be really critical to address. Whether you use that zero trust authentication or some other mechanism, API security is a must.
Yeah, it's true. Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So this is one of the major trade-offs of composable architectures, right? So we're now building our application to take advantage of the CDN and edge compute, but to retain those those dynamic experiences, that personalization, we have to leverage APIs. So we have kind of a potential proliferation of services and APIs that can actually increase the threat surface area. So it's critical now to leverage an API security solution, and these are going to be a bit different than some of your the more conventional security solutions that we're going to touch on momentarily, because they need to be tailored for that API use case, right? And so and we need to, first of all, we need to make sure that we know about all the APIs, right? So you're going to want to leverage a tool that does API discovery and helps you find and manage all of your APIs and make sure that we don't have any of what we like to call zombie APIs, which are APIs that were developed at one point and maybe they're no longer, you've iterated and maybe they're no longer in use, but they're still out there. So we need to have a complete inventory of our APIs and our threat surface area. And then in addition, we want to have some basic security practices in place, such as rate limiting, right? We want to control the rate that someone can request data from these APIs, or more specifically, that a bot or an attacker using automation can request responses from these APIs, so that they don't become overwhelmed and effectively create a denial of service situation. And the other thing that we can do with API security that's really interesting and is becoming increasingly accessible as we adopt and leverage AI is what we call schema validation. So that's where we're going to, before our request hits your API right at the edge, we're going to make sure that this request conforms to the schema of your API requests. right? So if it doesn't look like a properly formed API request, we're going to block it at the gate. We're going to stop it right at the edge of the network, and it's never even going to come into your infrastructure to be, hopefully rejected there. But yeah, it's going to be critical to leverage to API security, and it's becoming increasingly common and accessible and useful.
Yeah, definitely. And, we talk about some of this composable specific security concerns that we have and ways that we can mitigate some of these things. But I think it's important too that we also don't forget the old standby security stuff, right? The stuff that served us pretty well for a while. I mentioned earlier that security is a lot like having a bunch of different layers. Just because you lock your gate at night doesn't mean you leave your door wide open, right? So let's talk for a little bit about some of the general security practices that maybe still are perfectly fine and really should be part of the overall architecture, even if it's not specifically geared towards composable architecture.
Sure. So this layered security approach that you mentioned, we often call that defense in depth, right? So between the attacker and the crown jewels, which is often going to be your company and your users' data, we want to have multiple layers of security, so that in the event that one is breached, that we still have these additional layers. So there are a number of mitigations and systems we want to have in place. And the first, the old standby that you mentioned, Tom, that's going to be our web application firewall, and we're going to want to make sure that we have a robust WAF with a really great set of managed rules to block block the exploitation of all of the known vulnerabilities. And we're going to want to make sure that we're working with a partner that releases patches for new and emerging what we call 0-day exploits rapidly, right? So then rather than having to go around and individually patch every one of your APIs, we can deploy a patch on our WAF at the edge and mitigate that vulnerability across all of our services. And then in addition, we talked, I think, earlier about the impact of bots, the rise of bot attacks, the number of bot requests that are happening on our systems. Now, not all bots are bad, right? Bots crawl our sites and make that data available to search engines. So it's critical that we let certain bots in to do their work, and that we block bots, malicious bots, that are trying to do things like potentially do denial of inventory, right? They're trying to buy all the sneakers or all the tickets before other users can get them. The bots are also doing things like account takeover. They're just trying different combinations of usernames and passwords, or they're trying username and passwords that were breached from another site. They're trying it on your site potentially because they know that many people reuse passwords. So it's going to be critical that we have our bot management solution in place.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the other we've all heard about bot management things. We ticket sales, like we've had issues with ticket vendors who tickets go on sale and immediately get snapped up by bots, right? New sneakers drop from a manufacturer, and all of a sudden those sneakers are just gone. And I tell people sometimes, about 50% joking, that in 10 years the internet is basically just going to be bots attacking other bots, right? That's going to be it, right? Bots are going to be buying shoes from other bots. They're going to be attacking other websites. And I will say too, as far as like bot attacks go, I remember when I first started out in the industry, DDoS attacks were rare, right? Denial of service attacks were rare because it took a lot of money and a lot of effort to spin one of those. It's not the case anymore, right? Like we've seen bot attacks. You don't have to be. I guess this is the reality of the situation today. Is you don't have to be huge to be a target of a denial of service attack, and the attackers don't have to be rich to run those attacks. The tool sets, the tool chains, the cloud computing resources to spin these things up. I mean, we've even seen denial of service attacks that include we call them botnets, right? They're just computers somewhere that got roped into running this attack, including probably the one that's on your smart refrigerator or your washing machine, right? Like, it's as a consequence of more and more things being connected to the internet, and more computing available in smaller packages, being more distributed globally, we've seen a huge rise in denial of service attacks. And I think, as we think about not just security, but just best practices for building a website in general, right? It's 2024, as of this recording at least. You need a CDN, right? Because the CDN is really going to be the best way to really absorb these levels of attacks, and especially these distributed attacks. Is that going to stop every single one? Not. But I've had now in the last 5 years, I've had 2 or 3 companies specifically that did not know they came under attack because their CDN was just that good at absorbing the attack. It was only after the attack happened that they went back in their logs, and I'm not talking like a long time after, a couple hours or a day or two later, they go back in their logs and like, wow, we just had millions and millions and millions of requests over the last. I wonder what happened here. Sometimes, if they've got alerting turned on, they can see the increase in traffic and they never really see it on their website. And so, really, a CDN is a deceptively simple way of handling these denial of service attacks. And so, even with all of the new security opportunities out there, like some of the API security stuff is really fascinating to me. I love talking about that stuff. Some of that zero trust security is there are things happening in that field that are just mind blowing at how quickly we're advancing in there. But you still need a CDN, you still need a WAF, right? I mean, those are good tools to have, and they will continue to be good tools to have, regardless of what kind of architecture you decide to choose as you move forward. And Howie, I think one of the things you mentioned, just kind of in passing, I want to call out too, because you mentioned having a good partner that understands these things. I think there used to be a feeling in web application building, and especially among larger enterprises, that we always had to go it alone, right? We need our own in-house experts. We need our own in-house people to do this. And it resulted in a lot of in-house people pulling a lot of long hours, and really becoming very frustrated and kind of burnt out. And so as you're choosing a composable architecture, bear in mind that it's not just the actual architecture that you can choose best in breed. You can also find best in breed partners that will help you navigate this space. Find somebody who's done this before, who's got a good sense of the threats that are out there, of the way things are building, and work with that partner and build a relationship with them to help get your site and your architecture secured, fast, performant, and get that pushed out. I know, like we've talked a lot about the benefits to user experience, to workflow. Howie, is there any other takeaways that you feel that would be good to just highlight as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit that. You've hit the highlights. How Composable has numerous benefits, including to the user experience, and to the workflow that can have tangible impacts. Whether they're cost reduction or revenue increase. But it also introduces some new concerns that we covered. So you're still going to need the security solutions that we were leveraging, and we're going to want to make sure that we have some new security tooling, and we're really paying attention to our identity and access management as well. And then I'll just reiterate, it provides an opportunity to not just select vendors, but to select partners that have not only done this before, but are currently doing this with other companies, so that you can benefit from their wealth of experience across various clients and industries.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Howie, for taking the time to chat with me a little bit about this. It's been fun. I hope that for our listeners and our viewers out there, I hope that this has provided you with some good information to think on, and some things to consider. And Edgio stands ready to help as a trusted partner for you, and we would love to share with you some of our experiences and some of our successes. Thank you all for joining us on Beyond the Edge, and we will see you next time.
Thanks so much, Tom.